It's the Underpowered Hour. On this week's show, it's the second part of our two-part episode with Ralph Sek. We'll talk about winches, souped-up Land Rover Defenders, and contraband pickle juice. And now, without further delay, here's the show. Welcome to the Underpowered Hour. I'm Steve Beres, mild-mannered television executive by day and Land Rover collector by night. You can find out more about our cars and what we're working on at theberescollection.com or follow us on Instagram at theberescollection. I'm joined, as always, by my good friend, Goss.
Thank you to everyone joining us today. I'm the laminated safety glass to Steven's new Defender windshield. I am the strangely durable host of podcasting, Goss. I own and operate Pangle and 4x4 in Springfield, Oregon, where we live and breathe Land Rovers. Check us out online on Facebook, Instagram at Pangle and 4x4. Let's get started.
All right, Ike, and joining us for a second week in a row, Ralph Sek. How are you, Ralph?
I'm doing great.
Now, we, of course, are just rolling in from the last show, so it actually hasn't been a week. So if something terrible happened the last week and we're not talking about it, that's why. Yeah, that's why. We're joining you from the past. It's still great back here. There's, all that stuff didn't happen and all those people are still alive. Yeah. So it's great. We're just hanging out back here. So, Ralph, we wanted to, on the bombshell announcement of the Sarek 90 being the official rally vehicle of the team this year, there's so much more to you and to the venerable Sarek Autoworks that we were remiss to just let one episode go by without really delving deep into all the cool stuff you guys have going on out there.
We have to get to know Ralph. Tell us your earliest Land Rover memory.
Gosh, earliest one. I mean, I would say my earliest one was probably the L322 BMW powered truck. And that sort of happened because my background is BMW mechanic. So that's where I came from. I was a technician, multiple.
Cars or motorcycles?
It was cars officially. And I did have a couple motorcycles and did work a little bit, but never in a official capacity. But all my training and everything was BMW training. So that's kind of how it initially started, was some enthusiasts
remove all the turn signal units.
Yeah. The enthusiast that worked for me, that was a Land Rover guy, was kind of like, hey, these things have BMW engines in them. How bad can it be? You should maybe start taking them in. And that's kind of the first real intro, because Land Rover was completely off my radar at that point.
Interesting. Yeah. Wow.
So I was a little bit late to the game.
I don't know how many... Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know how many hardcore enthusiasts gateway Land Rover was an L322. It is my favorite Range Rover, though. That's the best one.
I do agree. I think it's my favorites. And I'm, again, to the BMW engine, which, again, a lot of the Land Rover community is going to be like, oh, my gosh, it was the worst. I'm going to respectfully disagree with that idea. But I will say that was the catalyst there, where I started to realize that not everything was BMW. There was a lot of inherent Land Rover in that vehicle. And then, the journey just started to go towards that. And funny enough, nowadays, I mean, we're doing... it's probably more than half of our business currently is Land Rover business, whether it's modern or, vintage / restoration.
Have you ever done the M57 BMW engine conversion that seems to be very popular?
I haven't done the M57, but I have done, M52, S52. We've done what would be the replica of the South African Defender. Yeah. So that was a petrol powered engine, the M52 at the time. And that was a marriage with some, P38 diesel components and some proprietary components. We actually did get a proprietary South African bell housing.
Oh, cool. Okay.
At one point. Yeah. But once we started hopping the motor up, the S52 is the M version of that engine. So it's got a little more displacement, a little better, hotter cam, so why not put, if you're going to build one, why not put the motorsport engine in it versus, the standard engine. And once we started putting a little more power through it, the clutch itself, which is a very unique pull type clutch. If you've ever seen the way that fork kind of pulls the springs on, instead of pushing them.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it has these weird dowels in there that will snap. And so the P38 housing turned out to be kind of a weakness, and the 80. When you start getting a motor into 6,000 RPMs and try to shift it with a nice R380 slam, the didn't really have the synchronization that like a BMW 6-speed would. So the natural progression was to do engine, gearbox, and put the 6-speed BMW transmission in, which again, going to your M57, that is kind of the European hot rod engine. So that diesel is very common. So being that they're the same basic block assembly, bolt pattern and stuff, other than the motor sits straight up in the diesel and it's listed over in the engine, a lot of the adapters and things are compatible. So they're using that, ZF manual gearbox, and they've got nice adapters for the LT230s and stuff like that. So that's a fun swap.
Oh, interesting.
On your South African spec build did you retain the other South African special features that they had on those vehicles?
Some of the ones we could get, yes.
I think they have galvanized bulkheads and galvanized chassis and some other factory features that are special to those cars.
Yeah, and I believe, and I could be wrong, but I believe the galvanized era stopped just shy of the BMW power plant South African trucks. There's like an era that had the Galvy bulkheads, if I recall.
Yeah, I feel like I saw one when I was there a few weeks ago that was BMW powered that had those features.
It could be, or it crossed right at the beginning. It's a very small production run. So
it's kind of an unusual special vehicle.
Yeah, what we tended to do was you take, like at the time we did one that had a 3.5 in it, and we, did as much of it as was viable to power plant it. And that was the first one we did with the R380 swap with the P38 housing, and then, went down the rabbit hole, ended up having so many clutch problems that we just yanked that out. And he was the guinea pig for putting the 6-speed in, which turned out to be, a fit. And then the truck becomes really different to drive. It's a little more sporty feeling. It's just a unique, if you've ever one, even the M52 powered one it's just a different, it just has a unique drivability to it that's just different than what you're used to in a Defender.
Now, did you enjoy that process, or was it frustrating? Sounds like it's kind of equal measures.
It's both, which you've probably realized in anything you're trying to, let alone resto mod or swap something into. It has its challenges. On a right-hand drive truck, it's all easier. Left-hand drive, you have an issue over there with the power steering pump, and the things are in the way, and so you have to figure out what you're going to do there. So it has its, problems that you have to work through and solve. Some
people move that power steering box from the inside of the chassis to the outside of the chassis, and then redesign the panhard rod mount.
Yeah, and there's a cool kit too out of the UK that we use quite often here. We've got like a LS swap here where we use that kit. It's nice. You use a P38 box. Yeah. And they provide the panhard and, the steering bar and the bracketry. And it's a kit, but you still have to do what every other kit you have to do, which is whittle away at it
to get it to fit perfect.
Fit. But it is a nice kit. And, according to the UK guys, they actually mainly do that swap because the P38 box is just so much more robust.
It is.
So, but yes, and then it has that benefit of getting out of the way. So we've done that. We've done electric power steering pump setups using like the Volvo power steering pump. And funny story, you can actually, the fittings fit to the Defender steering, so you can literally drop that Volvo pump in and run 2 hoses to it, and you have effectively electro-hydraulic power steering. We've done that for like power steering pump pulley fitments and things like that. So we've explored it. We've done the V12 swap, which I think is the only one that anyone's ever done. We've done a BMW V12 and a Puma truck.
Oh, cool. Wow.
Yeah. It's a really cool swap. It looks incredible under the hood. Like you see all those long intake runners in there, and it just, performance. You put a different motor in there and get much better performance out of it. But just the crank up start of a V12, zing, and just a smooth idle, and then to lift the hood and be like, there it is. Look at all those cylinders.
It used to be like, I won't say common swap, but it used to be a swap that was done to put the Jaguar V12 into series Land Rovers, like back in the early 90s. People were doing that stuff, and they would occasionally have an article about it in LRO, and people would wax poetic about the exhaust note and everything. And meanwhile, it's just like, at least the Jaguar one was just
yes, to say the
problematic.
least.
Yeah. Well, the BMW one's not too far behind. I mean, we got rid of a lot of the nuanced things and tried to run a standalone.
Yeah.
We had a Haltech unit on there running LS injectors, and we're like tuning it. Again, a lot of effort.
Right.
For at the end of the day, I mean, other than somebody having the wherewithal to say, I have a V12 in it. I'm bigger and badder than you are.
That's right.
It's a conversation piece.
It is a very big, but it's a cool truck. I
really
mean, it was fun to do, but it's probably the only one.
Yeah.
And it's still around town here, so we still get to service it and see it.
Cool.
It's cool. It has a great exhaust note. We did all this stainless exhaust on it, so it sounds really good. But that's a funny segue. Is the reason that came up was it actually was put, that BMW V12 was put in a Discovery at some point. And the reason that happened is because that the automatic gearbox, that is gearbox that goes into all your discos and everything. Well, that 12-cylinder BMW engine in like the 8 Series and the 7 Series of the 90s had a 4 HP gearbox. And you can take the bell housings off and swap them. So the funny story is they're like, hey, this is an easy swap, right? It's just a bolt
on.
In.
Yeah.
You swap the converter, you swap the bell housing, you bolt it up, and it just bolts up, until you realize that it's this, and you have to like figure out how to turn everything. But that's what started the rabbit hole. It was, it'll fit.
Interesting.
And that's how that whole thing started. There was, I don't know if the Land Rover, I think, did one.
Oh, okay.
You may want to look back. I think they somehow did it when BMW owned them. And some engineer was like, wait a minute.
You can just do this.
These two things can, and they probably had a bell housing cast or something that had the correct clocking in it and stuff like that. But I believe if you look back in the history books, that's how the idea came to fruition was.
There's always just one when it comes to Land Rover. It seems like they never fully said no to anything. Like, they were just like, let's investigate.
Build one and see what happens.
We talked to a guy in Australia who worked on the Rover 6 cylinders back in the 60s, and he's like, we put a Rover jet engine in a amphibious
There's always one.
109. There's always one,
It was a different time.
So,
it was a different time. They didn't have as much to worry about back then. They're throwing jet engines and things. Why not, right? Why not?
Yeah.
They got 7th at Le Mans with that engine.
We saw
Isn't
that
car
crazy.
at,
The British
wow.
Museum.
That's really amazing. You never hear about that. You never hear about Rover's racing history.
No.
It's wild.
It's the slowest
It's not
race.
a fast race always, but yeah, that's true. So besides swapping 12-cylinder BMW engines into Defenders, what's the day-to-day like there at the old Sarek these days? Do you still work on BMWs by any chance? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, we do. So it all started in the service department world, and that's what I was, a BMW master technician, as you would call it, back in 2007. And that's how it started. It's just like, I'm going to open a shop and I'm never going to have any problems, and it'll be fun, right? Ike probably knows this, and it's like,
I don't
it
have
has
any
its
fun.
challenges, as mechanics tend to not be the best potential business managers or business owners. So, it went through a lot of changes and adjustments and multiple different shops. But yeah, the Land Rover thing came a little later. I was working primarily service BMW and Mini Cooper. And that's how the the brand basically started. And then it transitioned a little into Land Rover. And that's where the culture is what ended up getting me into it, was going to like my first Land Rover event and just going, what is all this? I mean, I didn't have any off-road background at all. Like, I had no Jeep, no nothing. I just went out and was like, what's happening? And there's like Discoveries driving around. They're going through the woods, and I'm just mind boggled. Then I see all the people camping and cooking. And then I'm just like, oh my gosh, I want to do this. And then it changed from the mundane. I don't know. You get jaded of years and years of turning wrenches. It's kind of turns into that, these darn, he's just breaking all the time. You get, you just don't really get that enjoyment you once had by just fixing. But then you start to see like, wait, you can fix they have these cool old things that are like Legos. Wait a minute. And you can bolt these pieces onto those pieces and make a pickup truck. And you're like, hold on. And then that excitement just started to go. And then the culture just went, with Rove and then getting involved, meeting Bob, who's been an early, Bob Steele's been a very early adopter of what we do and believe in. And he's supported us a lot from very early on. And it just graduated into this, like we kind of sell the lifestyle now. We don't really focus so much on the fact that, the Land Rover isn't, the most reliable vehicle to buy. But hey, just think about all the value you get with opening this door to the culture.
Brief periods of ecstasy followed by prolonged periods of frustration. But it is great. It really is. And anything well maintained, they do as good as anybody, if you keep them up.
So follow-up question. This culture doesn't exist in the BMW ownership? I know if you ask someone to describe a BMW owner, a lot of people have a picture in their mind of what that is.
But no turn signal.
I was just going to say somebody who's never used turn signals. Yeah. No.
It is. They do have a club culture. It used to be a little bit more engaging, where they actually went out and tried to do things.
Like autocross, or what would they do?
Kind of, but it was mainly, sitting in a parking lot.
It's a hard time.
Just showing off your cars, that was the extent of it. And then it was the go fast culture. It was cross. It was, drag racing. But it was just, you go to places and look at people's cars. It was kind of like a cars and coffee vibe, which is cool. But when you do it every day or every weekend, I don't know. There was just not that, the destinations. You just didn't drive out to Uray and oh my God, what's going on here? And then get to drive Land Rovers around and meet the people and the families and all of that. It was just completely different as far as I could go to a Land Rover event without a Land Rover and I would be.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure.
Totally. Have to have the cool
I think that's interesting you mentioned that, because so many people, they're like, I have this project and I can't go to this event because my project's not done. You don't have to, people don't care about that. And they just want to talk to you and meet you. And, that's, I think, really important, because I think a lot of people get bogged down in a project that they haven't been able to enjoy for sometimes years. Like some of these projects that people are doing in their spare time, they're just whittling away at it. And it becomes a grind, it becomes an obligation, and you haven't enjoyed the thing. You've almost forgotten how fun it is to have. And I feel like a lot of people fall into that trap. So I feel like folks need to go to a Land Rover event, even if their project vehicle isn't ready to go, just to remind them of what.
Jump in with someone else. How fun is that?
I almost never.
And it's a great way to learn too. You drive with someone else and you understand some cases what not to do, but in most cases, you get some insight. And especially for me, I don't have really any vehicles newer than the 1980s. It's nice to drive in these new cars and see people who really know, like Jenna, who knows how to use all the buttons and everything. It's great. Even I suggest, even if you do bring your own car, man, hop into somebody's 80-inch and, go for a ride. It's, John Kosich is still getting over the deep bone and tissue bruising from the Anarch event in Oregon, but he had a great time.
Yeah.
And related to Land Rovers, if you're being honest.
That's true. It was, 100%. It was non-Land Rover related injury, but Bob Steele was still responsible. So
I don't think I drove my Land Rover at all at that event.
No,
everyone else was taking laps.
I was going to say. Yeah, I don't think. But that's great. That's an opportunity to hang out with those folks and try out some of that stuff that otherwise you wouldn't get an option to. And I don't know a BMW owner who would say, "Yeah, just jump in my car, take it for take it for a spin." It's not really something you do, but I will, and Ike is the same way. The keys are always in it. Just take it,
exactly.
Just drive it. It's a lot of fun. It's not like you're going to go real fast, real far. So it's fine. I'll just keep you in sight the whole time and it'll be fine. But yeah, and that's something that I think is unique of the Land Rover community, is that the people are so open to you just sharing and, come for a ride.
It's been like that. I mean, now for 10 years, I think I'm about 10 years in this as far as into the Land Rover culture. Yeah. So I used to always say, I'm always like, oh, I'm kind of new to it. And now I feel like, 10 years, I guess is not that new anymore. Right. But it has been a pleasure just to get some of that, get my groove back a little bit. It did really spark something new for me, something exciting to go towards, and yet now we're like innovating and always thinking about doing something different. And I feel like it keeps it. Well, I mean, we have a lot of things on the horizon. Obviously, the new Defender opened up quite the Pandora's box for us. Again, a lot of credit goes to Bob Steele. He was that early adopter when everybody was saying this thing's a pile of junk. And I'm not going to lie, he brought his truck in and I put it on the lift and I'm like, oh boy. What is this? Like, this is just like a car and no one's going to want to do anything with it. Now, Bob did, and he was determined, which he is. He's very, then he threw, and I remember his truck sitting here, and I had a client come in. He did catering at movie sets based out of Louisiana. And he was here filming the Walking Dead series, because that was filmed here in Richmond.
Yeah, right, of course.
And he went to Four Wheel Parts with his new Defender, first edition, and was like, hey, cool stuff.
What do you have for me?
And, long and the short, they were like, hey, you got to go down to, Sarek. We don't do anything with these things. And he came in and Bob's truck just happened to be here. And he looked and he goes, oh my God, I want that. I want that.
Yeah.
And then you start talking about pricing and he's like, let's just do it. And I'm like, wait a minute, what's happening? And I'm like, I think I need to buy a new Defender. And that's when I started down the road of which one would I get and how would I spec it?
Right.
And I took a little bit of what I knew from the older vehicles and said, oh, wow, you can get one with coil springs. Wait a minute. I'm doing that. Crazy. Yep. Oh, air is so much better. Whoop-de-doo. It's not. But there's a lot of people that think it is. I like that, that sort of static feedback you get from springs. I like that you can tune them, can lift them 2 inches and they feel like stock, so I set out to develop that and start, what I felt was pretty early into the game, going at it as a purpose-built, off-roader that you can still drive every day, and that's, and so that sort of branched out this whole different world of manufacturing. I have a very talented fabricator here that's just incredible. And we do a lot of, he does a lot of modeling as far as parts and then we can cut them out on the table. I know you guys have like a small table. We're doing a lot of that, scanning now, 3D scanning vehicles and looking at, it'd be nice to continue down the path of doing the cool stuff. I mean, I know the water pumps and all that, they're always going to be there. I wouldn't say we're passionate about that. We are passionate about quality service.
Water pump replacement.
Yeah. But so that's kind of, now we're looking a little bit at that. We're looking a little
design
bit
an indestructible water pump. There you go.
An indestructible water pump.
So that's where the money is,
windshield,
right there.
Kevlar windshield or something. Yeah, it's awesome. And it's not just the fabricating that you guys do, right? You also are repping what sounds like some pretty interesting manufacturers. Specifically, you've got a new partnership with a new winch manufacturer.
Yes. And we're really excited about it. Red Winches.
I'm really excited about it. Those guys are huge in RTV and winch challenges and stuff in the UK. So it's really cool to have that sort of natively here in the US.
Yes, and surprisingly, there's been quite a bit. Some Ultra 4 guys have reached out to us. So again, we're starting to factor in the winches in some of this stuff now, which here in the States has not been really part of the culture of competitive winching. So yes, they build some incredible CNC machine, beautiful, durable pieces of machinery that are just something to behold when you look at them. I mean, it's just incredible.
Yeah, I was going to say, they're not just really effective. Obviously, they're an industrial part and they're sort of fit to purpose, but they look super cool.
So being able to bring that in, again, that was a little bit of a piece of luck. And I think Red Winches just hasn't really had someone here in the States that's excited about it the way I am.
Yeah.
So we've already sold quite a few winches, and I'm on traveling the country. And of course, the 90, which, Jen and Liza are going to be blessed with, is going to have a really nice Red Winch on the front of it for Rebel.
Fantastic.
It's getting a cool new grill, so it shows the whole thing. No or any of that. So we're still developing product now that it's going to be kind of geared a little bit towards some of the nice anodized red pieces of equipment, including their recovery kits and stuff, which they make all that stuff, pulley blocks and things like that, nice and shiny. So that's we're very excited. We're excited about Olin's. We will be the exclusive place to get, Olin's, suspension systems for the new Defender. It's been a long process, but finally coming close to the finish line on it. So we're looking out there and seeing, seeing what people want, and then, hopefully we can find our niche in there that, that wants to build really cool stuff.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, it sounds like your vehicle is going to be well prepared, but are you prepared for the lightning round?
Sure. Let's do the lightning round.
Are you familiar with the lightning round?
I am.
You don't sound prepared for the lightning round.
I wasn't prepared, but I'm prepared now.
You're prepared now? Steven, are you ready? Did you have a follow-up?
I was born ready, Ike, and I think, I was just going to say, before we start the lightning round, we definitely need to make Ralph, I think, a reoccurring feature here on the show, because we've only in these 2 episodes just barely scratched the surface of all the things going on out there at the old Sarek Autoworks. So, we definitely, we need to explore some of this winching stuff and the customization and all that sort of business. But no, it sounds, what a better place to get a real, sort of special build of a new Defender. And of course you work on classic Defenders, you work on Discoveries, begrudgingly, I'm sure you work on the whole Freelander. How about my Freelander?
We've had a Freelander or 2 in the shop, not to say we were jumping up and down about it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's right.
We're pretty full-fledged with a lot of that stuff. A lot of series trucks. We send Ike some gearboxes, and he sends them back nice and shiny. So we're pretty proficient with wiring.
They still don't work, but they're very shiny.
They look nice when they show up.
They look great.
Yes, we're pretty much well-rounded in what we would consider Land Rover lore, in a sense.
Lore. Well, it's come to that time of the show where, despite everyone's best effort, it is time for the world-famous Ike Goss lightning round.
True story. Ralph, you geared up? You limbered up?
I think I'm as limber as I can be at this point.
I know the answer to this first one, but I want to hear you say it. First one, coil springs or air suspension?
Coil springs.
All right.
Nice.
All right.
Yep.
That was pretty. L316 or L663?
L663.
Interesting. All right. Yeah. Petrol or diesel?
Petrol.
All right. Manual or automatic?
Manual.
Alpine white or Fuji white?
Alpine white.
Did not expect that. 16 or 22-inch wheels?
16.
All right. And the best way to get 90 weight out of your underpants?
Wash them?
It depends on how much you have in them, but that's fair.
Yes.
All right. 7 out of 7. Well done.
Thank you.
Congrats, Ralph. Perfect score. You are a Land Rover master.
You are. All right. Well, Ralph, hey, it has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for all your time this morning. Thanks for everything you're doing for the team, for the community, and specifically for Bob Steele.
Well, thank you very much. And thanks for the time. I really enjoyed it. And yes, I'd love to come back on again. Just let me know.
Absolutely. We're going to do it. We're going to do we'll do a winching special here.
We can
something.
do that.
I don't know, because I do love those red winches. They are super, super cool. So with that, we will talk to you next week.
Thanks, Ralph.
Thank you.
The Underpowered Hour is produced by Liza Beres, Ike Goss, and me, Steve Beres. Pavel Svardov composed and performed our theme music. Consider supporting the show on Patreon, and if you already do, thank you. Your support makes the show possible. For even more, check out our Instagram or Facebook.